He'd be very direct in his video regarding the latest events happening uh, between Israel, Gaza, and now the United States. Um, Two individuals were actually killed outside the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram, killed by an individual, Elias Rodriguez, I believe that was his name, um, in retaliation for um, what is happening in Gaza. Elias Rodriguez is said to have remarked on video, "Free Palestine." Now, of course, we have outrage from the legacy media and, of course, from our Israeli uh, advocates here in Congress. And it's gotten so bad, so rancid, and so vulgar that I'm going to be talking about how we can try and force Congress to force the expulsion of two individuals who I consider quite dangerous and too radical, too unwell to represent the will of the people. First, let's talk about Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram. As you can see, it's ABC News. What we know about the two Israeli staffers killed in D.C. shooting, young couple with a bright future. And CNN, Times of Israel, Haaretz, um, MSNBC, Fox, all reporting on it. This is huge news. Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram were two staff members at the Israeli embassy who were killed outside an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday night, according to Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar. The young couple were not diplomats, but instead Lashinsky was a researcher in the political department of the Israeli embassy, and Milgram organized U.S. missions to Israel. In fact, Lashinsky was a Christian, and he converted to Judaism. The couple that was gunned down tonight were about to be engaged. The young man purchased a ring this week with the intention of proposing next week in Jerusalem, a tragedy. Now, I think a lot of people in this video know where I stand regarding this issue of Israel-Gaza, and that is I'm against using violence as a language, or as a tool to enact revenge. And in this case, when Hamas engaged in their act of terrorism on October 7th in 2023, this opened the door for the Israeli government, led by a slew of maniacs. And I'm not using that term loosely. In every definition, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the former Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, the leader of one of the leaders of the Yoded Yehud Party, Ben Gvir, Itamar Ben Gvir, and settlers like Yosef Stroop and Daniela Weiss, and I could go on. In every definition, these people are religious and secular fucking maniacs. In that, if you just hear them speak about how they use the term forced expulsion or forced renovation or genocide or mass murder, and they don't disseminate between Hamas and Palestinians. To them, it's the Arab. And what does that mean? It's not just pertaining to just Palestinians. It's pertaining to Muslims as a whole. And Yaron Lashinsky is somebody who propagates the Israeli government narrative in that bombing hospitals, bombing schools are permissible. And, here is one tweet that Lashinsky posted. And this was, of course, January, just before he was killed. Confirming what we knew all along, Hamas embeds itself among Gaza's civilians. Even hospitals are not off limits. Inside the hospital, terrorists distributed grenades and mortars along with equipment for ambushing IDF troops and tanks, right? And when you look at the article itself, right, you would think, if you're just reading the headline, you would think, oh wow, Hamas does embed itself inside hospitals. But when you do your due diligence, and you don't just go off the headline. You're going to read the article. This is the article he posted, right? This is January of 2025. Israeli intelligence indicates Hamas held hostages at the new Gaza hospital as UN health agency criticized for inaction. Now, where did they get this intelligence? Well, if you read it, it says the IDF recently completed a major raid on the hospital, arresting some 240 terrorists. Read that carefully. They completed a major raid, arresting 240 terrorists. How did they know they were terrorists? Did they interview? Did they put each person before a committee of sorts, a judicial committee or an investigation committee, and provide tangible evidence that each person, all 240 people, were considered terrorists? No. Fox News has long been known to be advocates for the Israeli mission. Not once, maybe twice in the last 10 years, have they slightly criticized Israel regarding the Palestinian issue. Maybe. The director of the hospital, Hussein Abu Safia, the Israelis claim, had gathered intelligence showing not only allowed he not only allowed Hamas to infiltrate the hospital, but actively collaborated. That's big. It doesn't say the Israelis have evidence. It doesn't say that the Israelis have intelligence. The Israelis claimed they gathered the intelligence. It doesn't say definitively. Another captured terrorist, Anas Mohammed Faiz al-Sharif, who worked at the hospital, and they're claiming he's a terrorist. There's no evidence to show that he was a terrorist, who worked at the hospital as a cleaning supervisor, joined the Nakba forces of Hamas al-Qassam brigades in 2021, told interrogators who are known to torture these people. Just like the CIA tortured Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Mustafa al-Sawi, Tawfiq bin Atash, and Amr al-Baluchi. And those are the 5 alleged masterminds and planners of the 9/11 attacks. Now, can we believe them? To everybody else, you would say, wow, we can't use the evidence to prosecute them for 9/11, but you can prosecute people who claim that this hospital is a Hamas hospital after they're interrogated. This is what Leszczynski used as evidence for the support of bombing hospitals. Now, why am I showing you this, right? I'm not saying that Aaron Leszczynski deserved to die. I'm not saying that, his girlfriend, soon-to-be wife, deserved to die, because I'm against the use of violence. The person who killed both of these two people didn't have the right to do so. Violence begets violence. I believe in the Christ parable used in the Bible itself, and I'm an atheist. There are some good things in the Bible, in the Quran, the Talmud, the Torah. But if you take them literally, of course, that's where the danger resides, self-interpretation. Nevertheless, it is immoral to kill somebody because all you're doing is precipitating the violence in a reciprocal fashion. And I'm going to show you what this led to, which is the basis of the video. What I'm going to play is a video that was made last year by a senator named Lindsey Graham, who I find to be absolutely reprehensible, morally, figuratively. And this is what he said regarding the use of nuclear weapons And he said this on Meet the Press. Listen.
So when we were faced with destruction as a nation after Pearl Harbor, fighting the Germans and the Japanese, we decided to end the war by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear weapons. That was the right decision. Give Israel the bombs they need to end the war they can't afford to lose, and work with them to minimize casualties. Well, can I say this? Why is it okay for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end their existential threat war? Why was it okay for us to do that? I thought it was okay. To Israel, do whatever you have to do to survive as a Jewish state.
And there you go. I mean, right there it says, Lindsey Graham, do what you have to do to remain a Jewish state, even killing everybody. Look, even if you said that every Palestinian is a terrorist, let's use this extreme example. Is that how you end terrorism? In the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, something I know very little about, we went to war, as the CIA put it, in 1999 with Al Qaeda. Well, after 9/11, we went to war with Al Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan, the Battle of Tora Bora, using the covert, well, not so covert operation called Jawbreaker, which was basically to capture or kill Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda. And what ended up happening was we eliminated most of them, but some of them actually survived, including bin Laden, who escaped to Pakistan because the Bush administration didn't want to pull the trigger because they needed Al Qaeda to exist for the war, to justify the war against Iraq. Right? That's the CIA basically saying that, Gary Bernstein, in his book, Jawbreaker, which is magnificent. Nevertheless, how did the war in Afghanistan go? How did the war on terrorism go? We ended up supporting it because we had to use these groups to conduct proxy wars to upend socialist governments in the Middle East. That's not a conspiracy theory. This has actually happened. And the prime example of this is Syria. While the Bush and Obama administrations were engaging in open warfare against the jihadist networks, we were covertly supporting them to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad. And to those progressives who basically supported this, ended up questioning, well, maybe it's a better idea to get rid of Assad because he's a danger to the people. Even if he was, now you have another danger called jihadism. Well, Assad is gone now, and the terrorist network took control of the country, and they're slaughtering who? The progressive Christians and Alawites and Shiites and other Islamic sects that are considered apostates to the Takfiri regime under Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, who the United States is shaking hands with, along with the French and German governments who are basically supporting them. Now, fast forward to terrorism. Is that how you defeat it? By killing more civilians than terrorists? Well, that's what you did in Gaza. Now, with Leszczynski and Miller killed, another senator who basically has used his girth, figuratively, to announce his anger on not just Hamas, but to Gaza as a whole. And this is what Randy Fine, a congressman out of Florida, basically said in the aftermath of Leszczynski's and his girlfriend's death. Take a listen.
We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender. That needs to be the same here. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with this culture, and it needs to be defeated.
We heard in Brooks.
So that's the problem with people like Randy Fine, in that Randy Fine is a danger to people in general. And, you know, he too had called for the nuking of Gaza. And, you know, I'm just going to read this short article. And this is the Times of Israel, so I'm not lying. GOP congressman calls for nuking Gaza like the United States did to Japan. The fact of the matter is the Palestinian cause is an evil one. Let me blow this up so you can really see this Okay? All right? The fact of the matter is the Palestinian cause is an evil one. Following last night's deadly shooting of the two Israeli staffers who was outside the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, where an American Jewish Committee event was being held, the only end of the conflict is a complete and total surrender by those who support Muslim terror. But look what he said here. The fact of the matter is the Palestinian cause is an evil one. He made no distinction between Hamas and Palestinians, none. And he's quite open about this. He's the Ben Gvir of American politics, Randy Fine. In World War II, we did not negotiate a surrender. We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender. This needs to be the same here. Something is deeply, deeply wrong with this culture and needs to be defeated. I mean, the Japanese attacked the United States. Palestinians didn't attack the United States. And so I consider Randy Fine and Lindsey Graham dangerous. Enough so that I am calling for the expulsion of both senators from their service in Congress. Now, how do we go about doing this? Well, it's called the Expulsion Clause. And what do I mean by that? I'm going to read you this document called the Expulsion of Members of Congress and the Legal Authority and Historical Practice. Federal government management and organizational law, construction, and civil liberties. Now, it expressly grants that the U.S. Constitution grants each House of Congress, the Senate and the House, the power to punish its members for disorderly behavior and with the concurrence of 2/3 expel a member. So that means you need 2/3 of both the House and Senate to force the expulsion of someone like Randy Fine and Lindsey Graham. Now, Graham has standing. Fine does not. And so because the majority of the House of Representatives is Republican and the majority of the Senate is Republican, there are 220 Republicans in the House. There are 53 Republicans in the Senate, 45. There's 53 Republicans and 45 Democrats in the Senate. And there are 220 Republicans and 212 in the Senate. It'll be tough. Expulsion is the process by which a House of Congress removes one of its members after the member has been duly elected and seated, like these two. The Supreme Court has considered expulsion to be distinct from exclusion, the process by which the House and Senate refuse to seat members elect. So in so concluding, the Supreme Court has held that exclusion cannot be used as a disciplinary tool. And Congress accordingly cannot undertake disciplinary measures on the members until those members have taken oath of office. This is where you have the expulsion clause. The constitutional limits on the power of expulsion are informed by the expulsion clause's text, historical background, judicial precedent, and historical practice. Presently, the only explicit standards for expulsion are the supermajority voting requirement, and that the individual subject to the expulsion has been formally seated as a member of that body, like these two. The history of the expulsion clause suggests that the expulsion power is broad and confers to each House of Congress significant discretion as to the proper grounds for which a member may be expelled accordingly. Now, look, if two sitting members of Congress are calling for the use of nuclear weapons on a population that doesn't have a standing military, that is enough for them to be expelled from their positions. They're a danger. They're unqualified, mentally unqualified. Fine is physically and mentally unqualified. He's well obese. And he has the nerve to post almost daily on his Twitter account about how evil Palestinians are, and he's calling for the use of nuclear weapons. And these two are alleged Christians, and both are on the Israeli lobby payroll. So that means that their independent thoughts are actually controlled, not totally, but they're led by money. And for anybody who thinks that the Israeli government is controlling the American government, it doesn't really work that way. The American government is the superpower. They can end the Israeli war whenever they want. If Trump right now went and called Netanyahu and said, "Listen, end the war would end because they know they would lose the United States as a backer, and what would happen? The end of Israel. Mortividis quieto. That's the end. And then Israel would use the Samson option, and that's the end of the world, right? It's not as crazy as you think, going by what's in the Knesset these days. Nevertheless, we're in conspiracy land. Do you think Israel has some blackmail on some of these senators? Fuck yeah. The Epstein case is proof of this. Okay. So, remember, the United States is the superpower here, not Israel. Accordingly, courts generally have declined to adjudicate the standards by which expulsions might be considered to the House and Senate. To date, 20 members of Congress have been expelled, 5 in the House, 15 in the Senate. Now, am I saying that Fine and Graham are going to be expelled? It would take a miracle. I mean, but here's the the danger, the prospecting danger of the future is that they're a minority, right? Most of Congress is not calling for the use of nuclear weapons on Gaza. But if one person is saying it, and that was Graham, the first, then Randy Fine is saying it, and he's the second. And all of a sudden, nobody's holding them accountable. And all of a sudden, other senators who are more Zionist leaning are basically going to say, well, maybe we could use, high power weapons. Maybe we could use nuclear weapons. Maybe we could use nuclear weapons not just on Gaza, but maybe on Iran, maybe on Lebanon, maybe on Syria. Hey, maybe on the Gulf. When does it stop? And that's what you need to stop right off the bat. You don't allow for a small percentage of cancer to become full-blown metastasis, metastasizing your whole body. Just get rid of it, right? Well, that's what I'm saying here. The American people need to get behind this. I'm a small channel, so I'm doing my part, trying to inform the people about the legalities of having these people out. I mean, do you really want Randy Fine and Lindsey Graham to represent you? To you, evangelical Christians, supposedly you're the moral high ground. Is your racism against brown people or your hatred for Muslims that greater than your love of Christ and your fellow man? Well, then how do you call yourself a Christian? We're either going to have sociopaths, nihilists, leading this country down to a path of self-ruin and suicide, just like Israel is doing. Or we can fight back. If this was the old me, I would choose the former. But as I got older, I know that thinking is not productive. I'm a pessimist, yeah, but I have to be an optimist because that's the way going forward. And for you who have families and children, well, then you know how you were as a child, that you enjoyed those days of youthful ignorance. Well, don't you think that your children in the future deserve that brief period of heaven on earth? I think so. But it doesn't just pertain to you. It pertains to the people who are being persecuted by American bombs and the Israeli psychopathic government in the Arabs in Gaza and the West Bank, and soon to be countries like Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. And we have to stop it now before it grows into a full-scale war where the United States will get involved and many hundreds of thousands could be killed in the prospect of a war that large. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching the video. Take care and have a great weekend.